May the words that I speak and the thoughts and wonderings of all of our hearts draw us closer to God, who is our rock and our Redeemer. It's so good that some of us can be back together in the sanctuary. It's good to be back to worship after a month of not having it. And we have a lot to celebrate. But I think one of the things that this pandemic time has given us, many of us, is a lot of time to think and a lot of time to feel. And then as we come back together, none of us are quite who we were when this started. We've changed, we've grown, we've shrunk, we've been challenged in a lot of ways. The church has been challenged. And it hasn't been easy. And I believe as we hope we are emerging from this. I don't know that this virus isn't going to wallop us once or twice more before we're done, but we're on a bit of a break now. And many of us are breathing easier because we could get vaccinated. Although there are also, we have to acknowledge all the feelings that are out there, right? That there's also people who don't want to be vaccinated and people who can't be vaccinated. And the children can't be vaccinated and they're not at as much risk in general, but they're going to be going back to school and they're not wearing masks, and some people are glad and some people are sad, and we're all just in a bit of a fluff, aren't we? I just made that up, in a fluff, you can use it. And who are we supposed to be as the church in the middle of this? What difference does St. Paul's United Church as a community make in the middle of all these hard, mixed, difficult feelings that make up this pandemic time? I believe we are called to model a better way of being together as people. And that means listening to those really hard words from Ephesians about how to get along. So the first thing the writer of Ephesians says is, in this passage, is first thing he says is put away falsehoods. Stop lying. Now, the church of the past would say, that's right, don't be a liar, don't be somebody who commits crimes related to lying, you're kind of like, okay, well, if you're going to be part of the church, you don't want to be one of those bad people who tells all those big lies all the time, right? Like lying to the police and lying about horrible things that you did and all that kind of thing. But I believe for the church of the present, we need to take this much more personally. And this isn't going to be easy. Because I don't know about you, but I probably lie every single day. And one of the biggest things that we lie about is ourselves. We lie and say that we're okay. What happens when we become, now I'm not saying that every time someone asks you, hey, how you doing? You need to say, well, actually, I'm really terrible and I'm going to talk your ear off for 2 hours about how terrible my life is. But do we find ways to, on one level, just to say, when somebody asks that, it's just a check-in and you say, I'm getting by, or one day at a time, or, there's other answers you can give other than I'm fine. I've noticed something that sometimes happens in interpersonal dynamics. Whether I'm talking on the phone or in a group meeting, sometimes somebody I'm talking to gets uncharacteristically grouchy. or impatient. And this happens a lot. So don't think that this is you I'm talking about, because it's not you singular, it's you plural. And the fact of the matter is, and this is kind of embarrassing, and I'm not sure I should be talking about this in front of the church, but oftentimes it's because the person has to use the washroom. But we are so trained, and I'm not saying we should all become big public sharers, but we are so trained to be like, no, there's nothing about my body that you need to think about or worry about. Everything is okay. So we don't want to interrupt, and that's all part of normalness too. But, if somebody's really feeling comfortable in the situation with the person they're with, like if I'm visiting someone in their house, they're a lot more likely, I think, to say, excuse me, I'm just going to go to the washroom for a minute, just make yourself at home. See how that changes things when we're willing to be honest about what's going on. Again, and I'm not saying that we all need to start oversharing, but having that willingness to be vulnerable in that, I'm not okay, but I need to fix something. I really suffer for that as when I come in, I feel like I shouldn't impose on people and that kind of thing. And what if I just really want a drink of water, but I don't really want to ask them to go and get me a drink of water. And you know that, right? You all know that. And how we struggle with it. And nobody's going to be the perfect host and always remember to ask and everything. But if we're all more honest and peel back that superficial, we're all going to do everything right, and say, look, here I am, warts and all. Let's just do the best we can. It's a different kind of community, do you see? That's creating a space where people can feel comfortable and at home and name what's going on for them. So I've talked about, getting right out of my shot here. See, I'm busy worrying about the people out there who are going to listen. I've talked about the sort of thing that is definitely universal human experiences, and that's a first level of things aren't going so well because people aren't necessarily being completely honest, and maybe if we're a little bit more honest, things will go. Because you've been on the other side of that, right? You've been like, what's wrong with them? Did I say something wrong? Are they offended by me? And you really worry about it. Teenagers, as you all probably remember from both yourself and any teens that you as an adult interacted with, can struggle with this a lot because they're just learning how to think about how other people are thinking about them. And so we all have these things going on in our heads, and we're worrying, like, are you upset with me? Did I do something wrong? And the other person is stressing or upset because they just got a text that they checked and you didn't notice them checking it, or they're just flappy about something that has nothing to do with you. So as a church, I believe we're being called to model the sort of community where we're honest with each other. And even if that just means that when we sit down in a committee meeting, because there's only a couple of you here who aren't on some committee. If we're sitting in a committee meeting and you've got something going on, that's why we sometimes do a check-in at the beginning of the meeting. Because it can seem like someone's really upset about something, or they're trying to rush something through, and other people are wanting to talk about it, and sometimes it helps to just put that out, to just put something out there. Like, I just got bad news today, so if I'm not quite it's not something you should need to apologize for, or that's often what people will do, and that might be a model in the way into it. I got some difficult news today, so if I'm a little bit off, that's what's going on. And you don't have to share more, and you don't have to pressure people to share more, but you can just say that, or I got some bad news about my health, or I got some and I'm not ready to talk about it, or I heard from a distant family member that something isn't going well somewhere else, and it's bothering me. You create that open and honesty. That's kind of the next level. So you've got the first level when it's just everyday normal stuff that everybody goes through. Then you've got, I'm going through something tough. But then there's a third level, and this is where it starts to get more difficult. When it actually is about the other person. So you're in a conversation with someone, you're talking to them, and they seem off. Maybe they seem off because they're just really thirsty. Maybe they're off because of something that has nothing to do with you. But maybe they're off and it does have to do with you. Now, you can't do anything about it. The person that is experiencing the other person being off. So now I need you to switch perspectives. And you're talking to somebody and they've upset you. And we have been taught, and culturally, the way we teach ourselves culturally, about 90% of the people in this room right now have especially been taught to not let people know that we're upset. But anger is a real thing. If you don't know what I mean by about 90% of us have been taught one way, I'm saying that women have been socialized especially not to let people know when we're upset. But what the scripture is telling us to do is to deal with our anger. I was reading some commentaries on this, and a vast number of commentaries, and a lot of people reading it, take a very surface view that it says, well, that means you're supposed to resolve your conflict by sundown. And that's one way to read it. But I think the writer of Ephesians is going for a metaphor. Don't let the sun set on your anger. Don't let your anger... It's like letting the sun set on an opportunity. Don't let the sun set on an opportunity. Like, don't let your anger... Don't just shove it down. Don't just forget about it. Because if you just forget about your anger and try and push it down, it doesn't go away. It stays inside and it becomes those things we're not supposed to do. Resentment and bitterness. Because no matter how good of a person you are, you can't make that go away. You have to look at your anger, which is hard. We're taught to not be angry, to think that being angry is bad. We are taught to think that being angry is bad, especially if we're women. And if we are men, we are also taught that we can't have any other emotion but anger. So we learn to refocus all our other emotions into anger. So we've got those two things going on. That and sometimes definitely the women can do that as well. But when men are feeling sad, society in general, I'm not trying to pick on any individuals. Like, I'm not picking on Isaac back there, but society in general says that men shouldn't be sad. But sometimes bad things happen and you're sad and you're allowed to be sad. The story I didn't tell with David was really, really sad. And he showed his sadness. And so, with the thing with any emotions is you can't get rid of them. You have to go through them. You can't go over it, can't go under it, can't go around it. You got to go through it. You got to feel it. And that's awful. You don't want to feel the sadness. You don't want to feel the anger. You don't want to feel any of it. But we have to. We have to go into it and feel it. And with anger, we have to try to understand it. Because we might be angry. All of our emotions are like another sense. Like, with our ears we hear, with our eyes we see, but our emotions tell us to pay attention to something that's going on. And if they're working well, they can really help us understand. Like, there's something upsetting me. Something unfair has happened. Okay, so let's say I was scrolling through Facebook, and I haven't told the person here, I'm going to mildly pick on them, but I hope it's okay. I was going through Facebook and I saw that Brian had won Gas for a Year. Now, I had entered Gas for a Year. I had planned what I would do if I got Gas for a Year. Now, if I was angry about losing that, it was very, very briefly. But I'm wanting to use an example just to get us into this, right? We can have anger that is me saying, that's not fair. He won it and I wanted it. But how often, I'm not actually angry, I promise. But how often are we angry like that? Like, they got to go on a nice vacation, I want to go on a nice vacation. Jealousy, coveting, That kind of anger, we need to find ways to say, okay, help me, God, I want something I don't want. And so help me to desire only the things that are good, and only the things that you want, that are good for me, and not to be jealous of my neighbors. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna put aside the jealousy, put aside the bitterness, and recognize that your anger symbol was working for you and helping you to realize that you're going down a dangerous path. You're wanting things you shouldn't want. Other times, your anger will tell you that something is happening that isn't right and isn't fair. The anger that we as a society are dealing with now because of Black Lives Matter, like the anger that's coming forward from the African diaspora, say we have been being mistreated. Their anger is what the Bible would call righteous anger. They're angry because they have been treated unfairly and the system is biased against them. And their anger has woken them up to that. And when we are in community, now whether or not we are actually, right now, we could talk about the history and why things are the way they are, but right now we are a gathering of people who all pass as white. I don't know everybody's history, but we all get the privilege in life that comes from we don't have people follow us in the store. Like, I've never been followed in the store thinking I'm stealing stuff, except for maybe when I was a teenager. But a black person wouldn't be able to say that. When I've been pulled over for speeding, it's been justified. So there's this anger that's come up. I mean, it's Black Lives Matter. It's Every Child Matters. It's Me Too. It's these moments of saying the world as it is broken. And the anger that we feel about that can become the fuel to our fire to fix it. So by not letting the sun go down on that anger is allowing ourselves to be angry that the world isn't the way that God would dream of it being, and fix it and make it better. We can do that. So don't let the sun go down on your anger. Don't just shove it aside, but use it. Fuel it to help you make things better. That is the call of this part of ourselves, and the way the church used to be tended to teach people to hide and bury their anger because it wasn't okay, and if you hadn't resolved your anger by sundown, you were a bad person. But the church of the future needs to learn to be mature in dealing with our anger. Wake up to it. Listen to it when it tells you that something isn't right and fair. And do the really hard work. Because if you start being honest, not just about I'm thirsty, not just about I got bad news today, but start to be honest about I'm uncomfortable with what you just said. I don't like the way that you're talking about black people. And to say that because you're uncomfortable, because someone's telling a racist joke or making racist comments, and you're like, I'm really uncomfortable with that. How does your anger help you to be truthful, but not fall down into malice and harmful things? Because you can be angry and not sin. That's what the passage is saying, is you can be angry but not sin. So as we mature in faith, we learn to say, hey, I'm angry. There's something I need to do. And Psalm 4, gives advice about anger and basically tells you to sleep on it. And that is better advice than don't let the sun go down on your anger, which brings me around to marriage preparation, and this is where I'm ending. In marriage preparation, some churches, and the way the church used to be, would say you have to resolve your tension before you go to bed. You have to resolve your anger. I didn't mean to say that. That sounded more risque than I meant. You have to resolve your anger before you go to bed. Which would usually mean you have to shove your anger down deep inside. And we've all seen how that can turn to bitterness, being snippy and short, and because it doesn't really go away, it's just buried down, and we'll find other ways to get out, because anger is like that, it's persistent. But if we go back, if we see that as meaning don't let your anger, don't shove your anger down, deal with it. When I do marriage prep, I teach people about something called HALT. And I've also seen HALT used in the addictions community and also used in other mental health settings. The time to be cautious, to realize that there's something wrong and you need to do something about it. If you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So 4 basic needs. When those needs are not being met, the addictions community says you need to attend to those and reach out and find ways to meet those needs without using your addictions. Because those are the needs that are calling out for attention, and in the past you've learned to medicate them, and you need to learn to deal with them. In marriage prep, those 4 things don't have an important conversation if you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Because your hunger, anger, loneliness, and tiredness you won't be able to bring your best self to an important conversation. So even though when you're really angry, all you want to do is solve the issue right now, because that anger is powerful. You seen In and Out? So watch In and Out. It's all about emotions, and it really helps clarify a lot of things and can be helpful, even though it's a kid's movie by Disney. It's working for you. It's trying to help you. But if you try and solve an issue when your anger is flooding your brain, you don't have access. It blocks off the access to the parts of your brain that help you do things well, that help you think things through, that help you be empathetic. So it's okay to take a break, but you gotta come back to it. And you've gotta be present with those difficult feelings, just as God in Christ is present with us as the bread of life, which feeds the church. Because we're gonna need to be well fed if we're gonna actually get in there and deal with all this stuff. So I am really glad that we're back together. And maybe this is too much and too heavy, and I should have preached on the song. But I am glad to have you here, and I am hopeful of the kind of future that we can start to build post-pandemic if we bring with us the things that we have learned and become who God is calling us to be. Thanks be to God. Amen. Oh my gosh, I talked for 25 minutes.